Hey, what's up guys, it's Mal from VanPatten Country Restorations, and today in this video I'm going to show you guys how you can take some 30-year-old furniture that you inherited from your grandmother and you love her, but you don't love her sense of home decor. I'm going to teach you how to turn it into something that you can stand to look at. Bohemian, shabby chic, quaint, not ugly, rustic, trendy. I'm done, let's just cut to the video part. Alright, so here's what we're going to be starting out with today. These beautiful tables were picked up off the marketplace for about $100. They are solid wood, and you can see that they're a little bit older, probably 40 years old or so. The clear coat's been worn down on them. I already tested a little bit of spray paint on here just to see if it would hold and if I had to sand. Looks like I'm not going to have to in this case, which is great for Shipwrecked. Now typically other pieces I would definitely sand all the way down to the wood, get way past that clear coat. But again, because I'm using this specific type of refinishing, you'll see why later in the video, but we use a very light bit of sanding once we actually get that first couple of layers of paint on in order to give it this look as if it's been sitting under the ocean, being weathered down for hundreds of years, and it looks like, you know, Davy Jones' locker just claimed this furniture. And you guys will see, it's going to be really cool. So the first step of any refabrication is just to go ahead and clean everything off. I've already done that on these, so you guys know the type of paint that I'm using is Rust-Oleum Chalked Ultra Matte Charcoal Color Paint. Now I do have a exact color match that I use called After the Ember in the Reblooming Co line. I will provide the link for that, and that's paint on. I also can turn it into a spray if I want to, but this is $7 a can, and for the purposes of this video I just felt like this would be easier. So we're just going to lay this stuff down nice and evenly across all surfaces of this table, and you're going to want to keep that can roughly 12 inches away from your piece of wood at all times. Now I tend to get closer than that and create runs in the paint for an aesthetic look. Until you really have a good feel of the paint, I don't recommend trying to do that, but it is something you can do. Here you'll see what I'm doing is I'm actually taking a very bright LED flashlight, and I'm making sure that after I've got that first layer of paint on, that it's inevitable that you are going to miss parts of this, especially if you're painting at night like I do. I paint at all hours of the day, so I do this every time I paint, because what your eye doesn't see because of that thick layer of black, you're gonna want to go back and catch later. One thing I like to do after I've got that base layer on is hit it with a heat gun just to expedite the drying process, especially because I'm making a video right now and it just made it easier for me to get everything all in one night's worth of takes. Good thing to keep in mind is not to get too close or stay too long on any one particular spot with that paint. It will end up bubbling or cracking, all sorts of nasty stuff. That heat gun is powerful. Next thing I'm going to do is pull off this hardware, which I did intentionally go over with that matte black. It's just going to give us a nice surface for the next layer of paint to cling on to. Just going to set that hardware off to the side real quick and go ahead and grab a little Tupperware container with just a dollop of that Shipwrecked Robin's Egg color. I'm going to grab a 3-inch paintbrush, and I'm just going to get a very small amount of this paint on there. It's really a sparing amount of paint, guys. Now, what I want you to pay attention to here is the way that I'm doing my brush strokes. So once I get that initial amount of paint on the brush, I will pick a spot on the table where I want there to be a larger volume of paint, and I will do one solid stroke there and let it taper off. Then I will slap the area around that initial dollop of paint with the brush until all the paint has dissipated from the brush, and it leaves this really cool sort of faded, tapered out look. One of the things I really want to stress here is the importance of symmetry in the aesthetic of the piece. It may look like I'm just randomly slapping this paintbrush onto this table, but I promise you I'm not. I'm very selective about where I put those large dollops versus where I let it kind of taper out naturally. Keep that in mind as we make our way over here to the coffee table, just touching it up a bit with the flashlight and some spotting paint like we did earlier with the end tables, and we're just going to go ahead and mimic exactly what we did on the end tables here on the coffee table, keeping symmetry in mind and just letting that paint come and taper naturally, not use too much of it, otherwise you'll just make a solid Robin's Egg table. And the whole time we were doing that, I was allowing those hardware pieces to dry, so they're ready to go back on the drawers. I'm just going to grab a Phillips screwdriver and put them back in place, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the aesthetic sanding portion of this build. So here you're just going to want a fairly fine grit sandpaper, nothing too aggressive because it would leave pretty noticeable lines in your sanding. I think I'm using 300 grit right now, and all that's going to do is take off those layers of paint we just put on there and go down just into that original clear coat, or what's left of it at this point anyway. I try not to go too crazy with the distressing, just hit a few spots here and there, no real rhyme or reason to it, just to make it look like it's been slightly weathered. And once we're done with this, it's going to be time for sealing. So the type of sealer that I like to use is polyacrylic by Minwax. It's like $20 a can at Walmart. The reason I like to use this is because it doesn't interfere with the chalk paint in any sort of way. It doesn't cause it to run or change the tint or color, and it just leaves a really strong, clear matte finish, and it doesn't scratch. It's just fantastic stuff. Now, I did let this stuff dry overnight before going in to seal it, and that's because if you try to seal over wet paint, the sealer will take on like a hue of the paint that you're using, and it just changes the whole aesthetic. You don't want any of that. What you want to do is do this during the daytime, get a few coats on there, it dries really quick. And that's it. That was the last step in this process. Here's what we ended up looking like at the end of the day. I think it came out pretty good. I love Shipwreck. It was one of my first ever designs, and I think anyone can do this. Now, if you do happen to want to get this exact paint, you can get it from me at Reblooming Co on Instagram or at VanPatten Country Restorations. Thanks guys, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Guys, that does it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all your support. If you happen to miss my last video because you're lazy and you don't look at my page often enough, and you want to see how I made the chalk paint that I used in this video, you can go ahead and check out the description below and I'll have that link. Also, if you happen to see any of my wonderful products on my page that you would like to see a tutorial done on so that you can rip me off, I will trade my services for likes. If you love your grandma who recently passed away, but she left you a bunch of really ugly furniture and you can't throw it away, but you also don't want it in your house because it's god-awful, you just let me know about that stuff and I will make it way better for you. Again, that's VanPatten Custom Restorations at gmail.com, VanPatten Country Restorations on Facebook, and at Reblooming Co on Instagram.
Shutterstock Music.